The sun rises over the Black Hills of South Dakota, illuminating jagged granite peaks that have stood for centuries. As the light creeps over the mountain tops, we catch our first glimpse of 4 monumental faces carved into the solid rock. This is Mount Rushmore, one of the most recognizable symbols of American identity, frozen in time. But how did this spectacle come to be? The Lakota people called it the Six Grandfathers. For thousands of years, their oral histories tell of how the Six-Peaked Bear Country was the home of their ancestors and their culture. Eventually, the U.S. government forced the Lakota people onto reservations. In 1920, the government returned part of the Black Hills to the Lakota as the Great Sioux Reservation, but it was too late. But after consulting with historians, Robinson realized that carving frontiersmen would send the wrong message. To attract more visitors to the state, he wanted to capitalize on the centennial celebrations of Abraham Lincoln and Thomas Jefferson, 2 founding fathers who represented freedom and democracy. Washington and Roosevelt were added later to represent the first and last great eras of American expansion, respectively. Work began on July 4, 1927, with a crowd of onlookers cheering as the first explosive blasts split the granite. It looked like a giant metal beetle and used high-powered drills powered by compressed air. It worked much better and sped up the process considerably. There were mostly poor Midwestern farmers who left the Dust Bowl in search of work during the Great Depression. Conditions were tough, and the pay was low, but the work was dangerous. Frequent rockfalls injured and sometimes killed workers, but it still took 2 years just to complete the framework of the sculptures. The entire mountain is 573 feet tall, and the faces are 60 feet tall. That's the equivalent of carving 11 full-size giraffes into the side of a building. Whether we like it or not, these 4 presidents represent a certain set of values that Americans hold dear. Every year, millions of visitors from around the world come to marvel at the colossal faces of American history. He said, "The Black Hills are sacred to us. Our people have lived there for hundreds of years. It is the place where our ancestors were born and raised. It is the place where we have our ceremonies and our sun dance. It is the place where we have always gone when we need to be close to the earth and to each other." His words are a reminder that the land we now call Mount Rushmore was once home to a thriving Native American culture. It's a reminder that the history of the United States is complex and often painful, but it's also a reminder that we can learn from the past and create a better future. The memorial is truly a sight to behold, and the 4 faces of Mount Rushmore will continue to stare out over the landscape for generations to come. Love them or hate them, they are part of the fabric of American history and culture. But even more impressive is the amount of rock that had to be removed to create the sculpture. In total, 450,000 tons of rock were blasted and drilled away, enough to fill 200,000 dump trucks. But the engineers soon ran into a problem. The granite was harder than they expected, and the drills they were using were up to the task. If you have any thoughts or opinions, please feel free to share them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. It took months for them to blast just a few inches off the mountain. Here, the past is carved into stone, but its meaning still evolves. Here, the past is carved into stone, but its meaning still evolves. With the threat of losing their jobs looming, the workers completed the sculpture in record time. Just 8 years after construction began, the sculpture was complete and ready to be unveiled. The damage was done, and the land had already been irrevocably altered. Some activists even call for the removal of the monument, while others call for the addition of more faces that represent the diversity of the United States. This controversy continues today as many people question whether the United States should continue to celebrate figures like Jefferson and Washington, who owned slaves. A hush fell over the crowd as the black veil was pulled away, revealing the monumental faces of American history. The crowd erupted in cheers, and the faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln stared back serenely. Well, aside from being founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln share something else in common. There were heated debates about whether to include Andrew Jackson or Theodore Roosevelt, George Washington or Ulysses Grant, and even whether a president should be included at all. Eventually, though, the decision was made to go with the big dogs, and the faces of Washington, Jefferson, Roosevelt, and Lincoln were chiseled into the granite cliffs. They all looked dead. Seriously, just look at them. Each face appears stern and resolute, with furrowed brows and pursed lips. Their eyes seem to bore into your soul and demand respect. This somber tone might not be the reaction that the memorial's designers were going for, but it makes sense considering the context of the sculpture. These are the so-called good old boys network of American presidents, who led the country through its greatest struggles and whose images have become synonymous with American values. It's a rich cultural landscape in the site of several important battles during the Indian Wars of the 19th century. You can even see the bullet holes pockmarking the granite today. And what do these four faces represent about America? Hey there, welcome to this channel. I'm your host. Mount Rushmore National Memorial is an epic sculpture complex nestled in the heart of the Black Hills. The colossal heads of 4 U.S. presidents emerge dramatically from the granite cliffs, like some sort of pantheon of Americana. At 60 feet tall, each visage is larger than the Statue of Liberty, and together they dominate the landscape below. He had a big idea, but he needed something even bigger to make it happen. Enter Gutzon Borglum, a world-renowned sculptor, looking for his magnum opus. Together they created an epic spectacle, the largest and most ambitious sculpture in the world. More than 3 million people visit the memorial every year to stand in the shadow of greatness and take selfies, of course. But before the National Park Service maintained the grounds and tourists flocked to see it, the mountain had a different name. In 1874, gold was discovered nearby and prospectors descended on the area, causing further conflict between the Lakota and the U.S. Army. Enter Don Robinson, a South Dakota historian desperate to put his state on the map. Initially, the mountain was going to feature for historical frontiersmen, including Lewis and Clark. But how do you choose which presidents to put on a monument dedicated to American identity? But it was untold sunshine and roses when it came to deciding which presidents would grace the mountain. There was only one problem. How do you chisel 60-foot granite cliffs? In order to speed things up, they brought in a new drilling machine designed by Italian engineer Luigi Ghili. Most of the blasting and drilling was completed by workers who lived in a tent city at the base of the mountain. By 1933, the project was running out of money and President Franklin D. Roosevelt threatened to pull funding unless it was completed quickly. On October 31, 1941, a crowd of spectators gathered at the base of the mountain to watch the unveiling. It was a massive accomplishment and one that seemed impossible at times. The sheer scale of the sculpture is staggering. Of course, not everyone was happy with the creation. Many Native Americans protested the sculpture, seeing it as a desecration of sacred land. These criticisms are valid and important to discuss. However, it's also important to remember that Mount Rushmore is a symbol of American identity. Today, Mount Rushmore National Memorial is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the United States. As we conclude our exploration of Mount Rushmore, I wanted to leave you with a quote from the Lakota elder and activist, John Fire Thunder. I hope you enjoyed learning more about Mount Rushmore and the history of the United States. Here, the past is carved into stone, but its meaning still evolves.